Samuel Drayton had just finished sketching out a design when his phone lit up with an international number. He frowned. Calls from Dubai weren't unusual. His wife's mother lived there, but they never spoke directly. Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman who wasted her breath on pleasantry. "Sam," her voice rang out, too cheerful, too sharp. "I love using your 600,000 from your ATM." She laughed as if it were the punchline to a joke. The pen slipped from his hand. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." Evelyn's accent carried the smugness of someone lounging on silk pillows. "Your money has been very useful. I can't thank you enough." Sam's jaw locked. "My ATM is with me." The words shot out before he even realized how bitter they sounded. For a moment, silence pressed against his ear. Then Evelyn chuckled low, a sound that made his stomach twist. "Oh, Sam. Always so serious." "Don't worry. Corinne understands. She knows I deserve comfort. You'll keep making money, won't you?" He couldn't move. His office felt suddenly small, the walls too close, his breath too shallow. Evelyn had never been subtle about her contempt for him, but this was different. This was theft disguised as entitlement. "How did you even get access?" he asked, his voice tight. But she'd already hung up. The call ended with a hollow click, leaving him staring at the screen, his reflection faint against the black glass. Sam sat frozen. Evelyn's words replayed again and again, each repetition sharper, heavier. 600,000. His money. His work. His years of careful planning, late nights, endless projects. Gone. Or was it? He didn't know yet. His first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a sick joke. Maybe Evelyn was trying to rattle him. She'd always called him the boy who builds boxes, mocking his profession. But there had been something in her tone, a certainty, a gloating, that pulled the air from his chest. He unlocked his computer, fingers shaking as he pulled up his accounts. Numbers glowed back at him, neat rows of transactions. At first glance, everything looked fine. Then he noticed transfers he didn't recognize, dates that matched Evelyn's trips abroad. His heart hammered. Each click revealed more holes, more money bleeding away, like a vein cut open. The office clock ticked. Outside, traffic hummed, life moving on as if his world hadn't just shifted. He thought of Corinne. She had been distant for months, brushing off his questions about spending, insisting he was overthinking. Now the pieces slid into place with a sickening clarity. He leaned back, hands pressed over his face. Evelyn's voice still lingered in his ears, dripping with arrogance. "I love using your 600,000 from your ATM." Sam dropped his hands, eyes burning. He whispered into the empty room, "Not anymore." The betrayal wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was personal. And he knew, in that moment, the line had been crossed. Nothing would ever return to how it was before that call. Sam remembered the early years with Corinne. They met when he was still struggling to build his name as an architect. She had a warmth that drew him in, a steady kind of confidence that made him believe they could weather anything together. They married quickly, not out of impulse but because it felt right, like two lives falling into place. For 18 years, he never doubted her loyalty. He signed papers with her, opened accounts in both their names, and never once thought about keeping anything separate. When his father passed, Sam inherited a modest sum. It wasn't fortune, but it was security, and he wanted it to grow. Corinne encouraged him to put the money into investments, stocks, property, funds that promised steady returns. He trusted her judgment as much as his own. He thought they were a team. Together, they built a home, raised routines, and filled their lives with the quiet rhythm of shared responsibility. But looking back, Sam could see things he had ignored. Small moments, barely noticeable at the time, that hinted at cracks beneath the surface. Corinne never liked when he asked about money. She'd smile, kiss him on the cheek, and say he was being paranoid. She used the word often, softening it with laughter, as if his concern was silly. Then there were the conversations about her mother. Evelyn had always lived far above her means. Designer clothes, first-class flights, rented villas by the sea. Her life looked like something out of a magazine. Whenever Sam questioned how Evelyn afforded it, Corinne defended her. "She's been through enough," she'd say. Or, "She deserves to enjoy her life." The tone in her voice wasn't negotiable. She expected him to agree, to stop asking questions. Sam didn't push. He thought marriage was about compromise, about letting small disagreements slide. And Corinne had a way of turning worries into nothing, convincing him he was making problems out of air. She would remind him how hard he worked, how proud she was of him, how safe their life was. Her reassurances were gentle, persuasive, and he wanted to believe them. He remembered one night in particular. They had just returned from a dinner party. Evelyn had been bragging about a week in Santorini, complete with a private yacht. Later, when they were alone, Sam asked Corinne how her mother managed to afford that kind of trip. Corinne's expression shifted, just for a second, before she laughed it off. "You're always so suspicious." My mom has her own resources. Stop worrying, Sam. She pressed his hand against hers and changed the subject. Moments like that replayed in his head now, each one sharper than before. At the time, they had felt harmless, like differences every couple managed. But they weren't harmless. They were warnings, hints of a secret he hadn't wanted to see. For years, he had thought trust meant silence, that love was proven by letting go of doubts. He gave everything without keeping track. And now, standing in the shadow of Evelyn's call, he saw how blind that trust had been. Evelyn had never hidden her opinion of him. From the first dinner they shared, she treated him like an outsider. She commented on his hands, how they looked worked, as if that was something shameful. When he spoke about his projects, she would smile politely, but her eyes drifted elsewhere. She liked men who wore suits, who talked in numbers and investments. To her, Sam was just a builder, someone with blue-collar roots, as she once said when she thought he couldn't hear. It might have been easier to ignore if Corinne had defended him. Instead, she let her mother's comments slide, sometimes even laughed along. Evelyn's voice carried weight in every conversation, a steady drip that shaped the way Corinne thought. What started as little suggestions, where to vacation, which brands to buy, what neighborhoods were respectable, turned into full control. Corinne leaned on her mother for approval, and slowly, Sam's voice at the table shrank. He remembered the gifts Evelyn brought over. Not the small tokens most mothers-in-law might give, but things that felt too much. Handbags worth thousands, jewelry that shimmered under the kitchen light, even a set of car keys once, tossed onto the counter as if it were nothing. Sam would ask how she afforded it, but Corinne would hush him, saying Evelyn had connections or had saved well. He didn't press further. At the time, he convinced himself it wasn't his battle to fight. Then there were the trips. Evelyn traveled like a queen, always in first class, always posting postcards from far-off places she visited. Corinne would talk about her mother's adventures with pride, as though Evelyn's life reflected on them. Sam would nod, pretending to share that pride, though deep down he wondered. The numbers never added up. Evelyn didn't work. She had no visible income, yet she lived as if money never ended. The wire transfers came later. Sam spotted them buried in their statements, odd amounts moving in and out. Corinne explained them away with vague excuses, helping with emergencies, covering temporary expenses. He wanted to believe her, but the more he thought about it, the more those transfers formed a pattern. They matched Evelyn's trips, her sudden upgrades, the times she arrived with new luxuries. Now, sitting with the weight of that phone call, the pieces started to align in a way that left his stomach hollow. Evelyn hadn't stumbled into wealth. She had been feeding on his. Each extravagant gesture, each trip abroad, each smug smile had been built on money he had earned. It wasn't only the loss that hit him, it was the humiliation. He had shaken her hand at family dinners, welcomed her into his home, let her toast at his table. All the while, she had been draining him, turning his work into her comfort. And Corinne had stood by, either blind to it or choosing not to see. Sam leaned back, a bitter taste in his mouth. Evelyn hadn't just taken money. She had taken years of trust and turned them into a weapon against him. For the first time, he began to see how deeply her grip had been wrapped around both his wife and his life. Sam stayed up long after midnight with the glow of his laptop burning into his eyes. He went through every line of every account, scrolling backward year by year. At first it was small amounts, transfers that seemed harmless enough, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. But the deeper he went, the more his chest tightened. The numbers grew, spread across different dates and different accounts, always linked to the same destination. By the time he reached the earliest record, the total made his hands go cold. More than 600,000. Gone. He pushed back from the desk and rubbed his face hard, as if that might change the screen. But the numbers didn't shift. They stood there, mocking him. His work, his inheritance, his savings, all bled away slowly, like a wound he hadn't known was open. When Corinne came into the room, still in her robe, he didn't waste a second. Do you know about this? His voice was sharp, but his hands shook as he pointed at the screen. She squinted at the page, then sighed like he was showing her something trivial. Sam, calm down. It's not what you think. Not what I think. $600,000 is gone. His voice cracked against the quiet house. Tell me you didn't know. Her eyes darted away for a second before she sat down, crossing her arms. My mother needed help. She doesn't have anyone else. What were we supposed to do? Let her live on scraps. Sam stared at her, his throat dry. You didn't ask. You didn't tell me. You just let her take it. It's just money, she said, her tone flat, almost annoyed. You'll make more. You always do. Why are you acting like this is the end of the world? Those words hit harder than the missing money. Just money. To her, the years of sweat, long nights at his drafting table, the pressure of keeping every client satisfied, all of it meant nothing. He stepped back from her, his chest heavy. This was mine, Corinne. My father's, my work, my life. And you gave it away like it was nothing. Her eyes narrowed, cold now. I didn't give it away. I helped my mother. Family comes first. You should understand that. Sam felt the floor tilt beneath him. He searched her face, hoping to find even a flicker of regret, some trace of the woman he thought he'd married. But she looked calm, steady, like she truly believed what she said. That was when it settled inside him. It wasn't just Evelyn. It wasn't just transfers or missing numbers. It was his wife, standing in front of him, who had chosen her mother's comfort over his trust. Something cracked deep inside, a sharp break that could never be mended. Sam closed the laptop with a slow, final click. The sound echoed in the room, louder than her excuses, louder than his pounding heart. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It was right there, alive in her eyes. The call connected, and Evelyn's face filled the screen. Her hair was done perfectly, her skin glowing under soft lights, as though she had just stepped out of a spa. She didn't look guilty or nervous. She looked pleased with herself. Well, she said, lifting a glass as if to toast. I was wondering when you'd finally bring this up. Sam leaned forward, his voice firm. You've been draining me for years. 600,000, Evelyn. That's theft. Evelyn tilted her head, amused. Theft, please. It's support. I raised a daughter who married well, and this is how family works. I deserve comfort in my later years. Do you expect me to live like some beggar? Sam's fists tightened on the desk. Comfort. You live better than most CEOs, and you used me to pay for it. Before Evelyn could respond, Corinne stepped into view beside him, arms folded. Sam, stop. You're being dramatic. She's my mother. If she needs help, we help her. That's what family does. He turned to her, stunned. You knew. You've known all along. Corinne's eyes flashed with irritation. Of course I knew. Did you think the money was disappearing by accident? You act like it's some kind of betrayal, but it's not. It's just money. You can't take it with you when you die. Sam stared at her, feeling something inside him hollow out. You never asked. You never once thought to include me in the decision. Evelyn leaned closer to the camera, her smile wide and sharp. Because you would have said no. You've always been so limited in your thinking, Sam. Building houses, sketching lines, it's all so small. Corinne understands the bigger picture. She knows where her loyalty should be. Her words sliced through him, but Corinne didn't flinch. She nodded slightly, as though agreeing. You put too much weight on numbers and accounts. Family is more important than figures on a screen. Why can't you see that? Sam felt his chest tighten. Because this isn't about family. This is about you both treating me like an endless machine. I work, and you take. That's not family. That's using me. Evelyn rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. You'll make it back. You always do. Men like you exist to provide. That's your role. Accept it. Corinne touched his arm, but her grip wasn't gentle. It was firm, as if to quiet him. You need to let this go, Sam. We're fine. My mother is fine. You'll recover the money. Just stop acting like you're the victim. He pulled his arm away, the weight of her words sinking into him. For years, he had believed he was part of a partnership. But here they were, mother and daughter, united, looking at him not as a husband, not as a man, but as a source. A well to draw from until it ran dry. The silence after his next words felt final. I see it now. To you, I was never family. I was only the provider. Neither of them denied it. And that was the answer he had feared all along. The house felt different after that call. Sam moved through the rooms like a stranger, noticing things he had overlooked before. Corinne's new jewelry, the handbags lined up in the closet, the clothes with price tags that didn't match their income. Every detail reminded him of Evelyn's grip and of Corinne's silence. At night, while Corinne slept, he sat in the study with his laptop open, combing through every account. He downloaded statements, saved transactions, copied emails, and filed everything neatly into folders. Dates and amounts piled up like evidence in a trial. Each page was another reminder that he hadn't been paranoid, that his trust had been sold piece by piece. He didn't tell Corinne what he was doing. He stopped trying to argue, stopped asking questions she would only dismiss. On the surface, he kept quiet. Inside, his anger hardened into something sharper, something colder. He wasn't going to shout anymore. He was going to build a case. One evening, he called an old friend, Nathaniel Mercer, a lawyer he had known since college. Nate listened carefully as Sam laid out the details. There was a long pause before his friend spoke. This is going to get ugly, Nate said finally. You're talking about years of siphoned funds, a spouse who knew, and a mother-in-law living it up overseas. If you go through with this, it won't be a quiet separation. Are you ready for that? Sam's voice didn't waver. I'm ready. I can't stay in this anymore. Nate sighed. Then start preparing. Keep every document. Don't confront her again without counsel. And Sam, be ready to lose more before you win. The warning settled heavy in his chest, but it didn't shake his resolve. He had already lost more than he ever imagined. The fight was the only thing left. Within a week, Sam packed a few bags and left the house. He rented a small apartment on the edge of town, nothing fancy, just a place with 4 walls and quiet. The first night there, he sat on the floor with a single chair and his computer, looking around at the bare rooms. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel hostile. It felt like space to breathe. Corinne called, but he let it ring. She sent messages, but he didn't reply. Every word she had spoken during that call with Evelyn echoed too clearly. He no longer saw her as a partner. She had made her choice, and he was making his. His anger no longer boiled. It settled into something steady, a current that pushed him forward. He knew there would be lawyers, hearings, and accusations. He knew Corinne and Evelyn would fight back, twisting his words, painting him as selfish. But none of that mattered anymore. Sam wasn't leaving to escape. He was leaving to fight. And this time, he would make sure every step was documented, every dollar accounted for, every lie brought into the light. The battle had begun, and he was ready to face it. Nate moved quickly once he saw the record. He studied the transfers, the amounts, the repeated destinations, and began piecing them together into something solid. Every wire sent to Evelyn's accounts was traced, labeled, and tied back to Sam's income. The pattern was clear, years of steady exploitation dressed up as help. Sam sat across the desk as Nate slid the files into a folder. "This isn't just a family dispute," Nate said. "This is financial abuse. She's been living off you like a parasite. The court will see it." Sam nodded, his jaw set. It was the first time someone outside the situation said it plainly, without excuses. It gave him a sense of ground beneath his feet. Meanwhile, Evelyn showed no caution. She kept sending updates to Corinne, who sometimes forwarded them to Sam as if to taunt him. Photos of lavish dinners, shopping trips, desert safaris, yachts in the harbor. Each image was proof of what she had done with his money. She thought herself untouchable, too far away to be reached. She didn't realize every display only strengthened the case Nate was building. Corinne, on the other hand, tried to pull him back. She called often, her tone swinging between soft and sharp. Some days she pleaded, saying they could fix things, that their marriage mattered more than numbers. Other days she accused him of betrayal, of abandoning her and her mother in a time of need. "Sam," she said during one call, her voice thick with false warmth, "we've built nearly 20 years together. You can't throw that away over money. Don't let some lawyer poison you against your own wife." He listened in silence, letting her speak, but he felt no pull. The words that once might have softened him now sounded hollow. When she paused, waiting for a reply, he simply said, "You made your choice, Corinne," and ended the call. The strength in those moments surprised him. For so long, he had been the one on the defensive, explaining, defending, excusing. Now the roles were shifting. With every piece of evidence Nate collected, with every desperate message from Corinne, the balance of control tilted back toward him. One evening, sitting in his bare apartment, Sam opened his laptop and reread the folder Nate had compiled. Transfers, statements, photographs, timelines, proof stacked neatly, undeniable. He felt something he hadn't felt in months, steadiness. For the first time since that call from Dubai, he could see a way forward. Evelyn's arrogance was her weakness. Corinne's blind loyalty only tied her tighter to the same downfall. And Sam, the man they thought was nothing more than a provider, now held the records that could bring it all down. He closed the laptop, his breath slow and even. Control had been stolen from him piece by piece over the years. Now, piece by piece, he was taking it back. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Sam sat at the table beside Nate, his hands folded tight, eyes fixed straight ahead. Across the room, Corinne avoided his gaze. She looked composed, but her clenched jaw betrayed her. Evelyn wasn't there. She had stayed in Dubai, certain her distance would protect her. But her absence only made the room feel heavier, her presence hanging over every word like smoke. Nate rose first, laying out the case in clean, steady language. He presented records showing transfers, emails where Corinne confirmed helping her mother, and statements proving Evelyn had no income of her own. Each document landed like a stone dropped into water, rippling across the courtroom. Sam watched the judge's eyes narrow as the pile of evidence grew higher. Corinne's lawyer tried to argue back. They painted Evelyn as a struggling widow who needed support, claimed the transfers were acts of kindness, insisted there was no deception. But the numbers didn't lie. $600,000 didn't vanish out of kindness. It was systematic, steady, deliberate. When Corinne was called to testify, her mask cracked. She admitted she had known about the transfers but argued that Sam was too obsessed with money to understand why her mother needed it. She tried to sound noble, but the judge's expression stayed firm, unimpressed. The moment that broke her case came when Nate showed photographs of Evelyn's trips, yachts, luxury hotels, diamond-studded evenings, all paid for during the exact dates of the transfers. Corinne's explanation faltered. Her voice stumbled. The courtroom grew quiet as she realized there was no way to spin the truth. By the time arguments closed, the outcome was clear. The judge's ruling came down like a weight. Evelyn's accounts were to be frozen. International cooperation was requested for fraud investigation. Corinne's share of the settlement shrank to nearly nothing, her claims dismissed one after the other. Sam sat still as the words sank in. He had prepared for this, but the finality still struck hard. Years of manipulation and betrayal were laid bare for strangers to judge, and the judgment had landed on his side. Corinne's face twisted as the ruling was read. She mouthed his name once, as though begging him to look at her, but he didn't. The last thread between them had already snapped. She had chosen Evelyn, and now she was left standing beside her mother's downfall. As they left the courtroom, Nate clapped a hand on Sam's shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. Sam nodded, though his chest felt heavy with something more complex than victory. He thought of Evelyn, thousands of miles away, watching her Dubai life unravel. He thought of Corinne, once his partner, now stripped of the very comfort she had traded him for. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't shouted. It was written in frozen accounts, in court papers, in the silence of a marriage undone. For the first time in years, the balance had shifted, and Sam had come out standing. Corinne showed up at his apartment 2 weeks after the ruling. She stood in the doorway, her makeup smudged, her eyes red. For the first time in years, she looked small, stripped of the confidence she once carried. "Sam," she whispered, her voice shaky. "We can fix this. We can start over. I made mistakes. I see that now. But we've built a life together. Don't throw it all away." He didn't answer right away. He studied her, remembering the years of shared dinners, late nights, quiet mornings, all the pieces of a marriage that once felt real. But those memories now carried a different weight. They weren't proof of love. They were the cover under which betrayal had grown. "You didn't make a mistake, Corinne," he said finally, his voice steady. "You made a choice." Over and over again. Tears ran down her cheeks as she stepped closer. "I was trying to take care of my mother. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd forgive me. We can move past this." Sam shook his head. "You didn't just take care of her. You gave her everything, and you left me with nothing. There's no past to move from. There's only what's left, and that isn't us." Her shoulders sagged. She reached out, but he stepped back. After a long silence, she left, closing the door softly behind her. The sound echoed in the small apartment, final and quiet. Not long after, Evelyn began calling. The first messages were sharp, full of anger. She accused him of betrayal, of destroying his own family, of being cruel to a woman who had only wanted comfort. When those didn't draw him in, her tone shifted. She left voicemails with trembling words, begging for sympathy, blaming banks, lawyers, even Corinne, but never herself. Sam listened to one of them once, then deleted the rest without playing them. He didn't need to hear more. Evelyn would never change. Her life of luxury was crumbling, and she was reaching for anyone to blame but the mirror. In the evenings, Sam walked the quiet streets near his apartment. He thought about everything he had lost, his marriage, his home, the belief that love was unshakable. The grief was there, heavy and real. But beneath it was something else, a steady current of relief. The weight of years of manipulation was gone. No more dinners where Evelyn looked down on him. No more excuses from Corinne. No more accounts draining behind his back. For the first time, the silence in his life wasn't filled with suspicion. It was clean. He bought a small second-hand table, a bed, a couch. Slowly, the apartment began to look less like a place to hide and more like a place to live. It wasn't much, but it was his. One night, as he sat at that table with a simple meal, he realized the truth. His old life was finished. But the parasite that fed on it was finished too. What remained was his alone, and it was enough to begin again. The courthouse doors swung open, and Sam stepped out into the sharp afternoon air. He held a stack of papers tucked under his arm, the official end to years of betrayal. The sky above was clear, the streets alive with traffic and voices, yet all he heard was his own footsteps against the stone steps. As he reached the sidewalk, his mind drifted back to that call, the one that had started it all. He could still hear Evelyn's voice, smooth and mocking. "I love using your 600,000 from your ATM." At the time, the words had pierced him with confusion and rage. Now they echoed differently. They weren't just a taunt. They were the truth of how she had always seen him. Not as a son-in-law, not as family, but as a machine she could use until it broke. For years, he had believed Corinne stood beside him, that their marriage was a partnership. But she had stood with her mother instead, defending the theft, dismissing his pain. To them, His worth was measured in deposits, not devotion. It was a reality he had been blind to until that call forced his eyes open. He stopped at the curb and looked at the courthouse behind him. Inside, a judge's ruling had stripped away what little disguise remained. Evelyn's accounts were frozen. Corinne's lies had collapsed. The woman he married was no longer his partner, no longer his wife in any true sense. That life was finished. And yet, standing there, Sam felt taller than he had in years. Because the ATM Evelyn thought she was draining wasn't his account, it was him. His discipline, his work, his will to keep moving. That was something she could never touch, something no transfer could empty. The fight had cost him. It had torn apart nearly 2 decades of marriage, left him starting over in a small apartment with nothing but a bed, a table, and a stack of case files. But it had also given him something he hadn't realized he lost, himself. He thought of the silence in his apartment at night, the kind that didn't press against him but gave him space. He thought of the meals he cooked for one, the simple peace of knowing every dollar spent was his decision alone. It wasn't wealth, but it was freedom. A car passed, horn blaring, pulling him back to the present. He crossed the street, the papers still under his arm, his stride steady. There was no going back, no chance of rebuilding what was broken with Corinne, no saving Evelyn from the ruins of her own greed. And he didn't want to. As he reached the other side, he breathed in deep, filling his lungs with air that felt sharper, cleaner. The first call had been a wound. But now, it was just a memory. Evelyn had been wrong all along. His ATM wasn't money. It was the fight still inside him. And that was something no one could take. Sam kept walking, ready to build again, this time for himself.